Hello everyone, welcome to Chetan Bharat Learning and welcome back to our series UPSC Mains 2021 course and test series. So this course is both a course in which we'll discuss 5 questions every day from each and every topic, and it's also a test series because every Sunday, every second Sunday, you'll get a test for your UPSC Mains 2021. Now, as you have watched previous lectures, you know by now that every lecture we discuss 5 questions from every topic. Now, I am taking your economics portion, alright? So, as you guys all know that we have shared this timetable with you all, those of you who have enrolled with us. Now, we are done with 5 lectures of economics. Through these 5 lectures, we have covered almost half the syllabus of your UPSC Mains 2021 for economics, right? Now we'll move on to lecture number 6. Now, in lecture number 6, which topic we shall cover? Well, we shall cover this topic. Basically, we'll cover agriculture through 5 questions. And through these 5 questions, we'll try to cover as many issues as possible that are relevant, pertinent for your UPSC Mains 2021. So what's written in the syllabus? Major crops and cropping patterns in different parts of the country, different types of irrigation and irrigation systems, storage, transport, marketing of agricultural produce, issues and related constraints, e-technology in the aid of farmers. So these are the topics on the basis of which, which we shall cover through 5 questions. So without further delay, let's start with question number 1. Farm diversification, which is often described as a strategy for increasing farm income in India, faces huge challenges. Discuss. Now, it's a very simple question. It's a pretty direct question. They're talking about farm diversification. Now, generally, it is said that farm diversification is very important to support rural economy. Right? So this question can also be divided into 2 parts. First, in the first part, you'll describe what farm diversification is and what are its advantages, right? So in the first part, you'll say what is farm diversification and then what are its advantages. And then we'll discuss what are the challenges that this area in farm sector is facing constraints. What are the challenges that this area in farm sector is facing? All right. So we'll start with what is farm diversification. Now, before understanding what farm diversification is all about, you need to know what sort of agriculture our farmers are practicing. They say that in India, we follow monoculture of wheat and rice. Monoculture of wheat and rice. Rice in Kharif season and wheat in Rabi season. Right? Now, this has created a situation, this has created a lot of problems. The reason why farmers follow monoculture of wheat and rice is because MSP and procurement is happening in these 2 crops. Government provides price support system and a very strong price support system called MSP in these 2 crops. Now, there is a need for farm diversification because our agriculture is absolutely dependent upon yield and productivity of these 2 crops. Now, farm diversification in itself can be divided into 2 parts. Generally, with the kind of mistake that people commit is, they collate farm diversification with crop diversification. But the thing is that crop diversification is just one part of farm diversification. Farm diversification also includes shift towards allied activities. Now, what are allied activities? Well, livestock rearing like dairy, poultry, fishery. Livestock rearing, where you raise poultry, you raise cattle, and through that you earn money, right? By raising cattle, you earn money by selling their milk and all that stuff. Then fisheries, livestock, forestry. These come under allied activities. All right. So they say that to support farmers' income, because after all, government has promised to double farmers' income by 2022. That's what they have said, right? Now the way to diversify, the way to double farmers' income is, first of all, farmers or Indian farms should diversify their cropping patterns. So we require crop diversification. We should reduce dependence on wheat and rice, and we should focus on other crops as well. Then farmers should also start with allied activities. So for example, farmers should start dairy farming also along with their crop farming. So there are some farmers who are actually growing wheat. They should also side by side rear cattle. What will happen if they'll do that? Well, if they are rearing cattle and they are growing wheat, well, their incomes would get supplemented by dairy farming, right? Their incomes would increase. Make sense? So farm diversification is all about diversification in cropping patterns and diversification from crop farming to other activities. All right. So this is basically what farm diversification is all about. Now, what are the advantages of farm diversification? Let's take a look at that. That's the first part of your question, right? Advantages. Number one advantage, soil fertility. They say that overuse of or too much dependence on wheat and rice has destroyed the fertility of our soils, right? There are certain soils in India that are not conducive for growing rice. Various dry lands in India, they are not conducive for growing rice, but people are growing rice on those lands. Why? Simply because government is supporting rice and wheat, right? So soil fertility would increase if you diversify. Diversification is very important for improving soil fertility. There is this another example. If farmers start growing pulses on their lands, well, pulses have this quality of directly fixing nitrogen from the atmosphere. So you don't have to apply urea on your lands. The main reason for applying urea, a fertilizer, on your lands is that you want to make your soil nitrogen rich. But if you're growing pulses side by side rice or side by side wheat, you're actually those pulses are naturally fixing nitrogen into your soil, and there is less requirement for nitrogenous fertilizers. Make sense, right? So if you diversify your crop, well, your soil fertility would increase. Then there is this another advantage. You see, rice is very, very, very water intensive, right? So there is this huge burden on water, right? There is too much water that is required for rice farming. If farmers are allowed and they are given remunerative options to grow other crops, well, their dependence on water would decrease and we would preserve this precious resource called water. So, water dependency decreases, right? So soil fertility, water dependency decreases. Then crop diversification would also improve the health of your ecosystem. So these are the major advantages. There are other advantages with respect to crop diversification, but you will find them in the PDF given to you with this lecture. Don't worry about that. These were the major advantages. Now let's take a look at the advantages of diversifying from crop farming to livestock, right? Or allied activities. Well, if farmers are growing crops, if farmers are rearing livestock side by side to crop farming, well, their incomes get supplemented, and that's a natural thing to say, right? So, for example, there are certain farmers who are growing pulses, and on their farms they're also rearing cattle, so they can earn money through pulses. They can earn money by selling the milk of that cattle, right? So their incomes, their sources of income are also getting diversified. Make sense? So income support. Right? Reduce dependence on monsoon. Make sense? Right? and so on and so forth. So these are the basic advantages that you get when you diversify your farming practices. All right. Now let's take a look at the second part of your question. Farm diversification, which is often described as a strategy for increasing farm income in India, faces huge challenges. Now let's come to the challenges part. So what are the challenges? Number one. You see, for farm diversification, if you're diversifying towards livestock rearing, well, for rearing livestock, you require fodder. And fodder, for growing fodder, you know about fodder, right? For growing fodder, you require water. Now, as they say that close to 60%, approximate, close to 60% of your cropped area, gross cropped area, is rain-fed. Rain-fed means that it is not irrigated properly, it does not have irrigation facilities, and it is dependent on monsoon, right? So close to 60% of your land is rain-fed, and that is why you can't diversify to different crops and you can't diversify to different activities like livestock rearing. Why livestock rearing? Because for livestock rearing, you require water for feeding that livestock, right? So 60% of your land is rain-fed. There are little irrigation facilities. So you need to enhance your irrigation facilities. This is one constraint. Then the next constraint is that in areas where there is irrigation, well, their water is being overused. So 60% of your land is not irrigated properly, but 40% of your land which is irrigated properly, their water is being used inefficiently. As a matter of fact, they're overusing the water. For example, states like Punjab, Haryana, Western Uttar Pradesh are overusing water, and the water table in these geographical regions has declined considerably because people are growing rice over there, and for rice they are extracting too much groundwater. So water table has declined. So areas where there are irrigation facilities, well, they are overusing those irrigation facilities. So there is shortage of water. So overuse of irrigation facilities. This is one of the constraints. Then support for wheat and rice. There is support for wheat and rice, but lack of support for other crops. What are those crops? Well, like coarse grains, jowar, bajra, ragi, pulses, oil seeds, etc. All right. Then there are other challenges also. Lack of proper market linkages. You know, majority of the farmers do not have access to APMC mandis. There is only a small minority of farmers who have access to MSP, who have access to APMC mandis. Majority of the farmers do not have much access to these mandis, these regulated mandis. And therefore, these farmers do not have proper market linkages, especially for crops other than wheat and rice. Farmers are not diversifying away from wheat and rice because they do not have proper market linkages for other crops. It is very difficult for them to find markets where they can sell different crops other than wheat and rice. And along with this problem, there is lack of price discovery. Most of your farmers do not have the information about prices of different crops other than wheat and rice. So there is this problem. That is why farmers are not diversifying. Then, now let's talk about livestock rearing, allied activities. Lack of institutional support for allied activities. right? The way government supports wheat and rice, they are not supporting in the same way other allied activities. Like dairy farming does not have the kind of support that wheat and rice receives. Farming of wheat and rice receives. All right. Then there is another problem with infrastructure, lack of proper storage facilities, proper transport facilities. So various perishable commodities are getting they rot in the way. Right? They are not being preserved properly. There are not enough cold storages that are available. So post-harvest management struggles in India, both in the case of different other crops like horticultural crops and in the case of dairy, poultry and other allied activities, right? So there is this problem. So infrastructure is a big problem. Post-harvest management is another problem. So these are the major constraints, challenges that are being faced by farm diversification. Now you have discussed what is farm diversification, what are its advantages, and you have discussed what are the challenges. Now in the end, you'll write what sort of government programs are there to support farm diversification. Right? So there are various government programs, there are various food processing programs. The government is also building various cold storages, various infrastructure. Government is actually pushing forward towards food processing so that farmers get more market linkages. Government is coming up with market reforms. Like these three farm bills, these three farm acts, these were introduced to allow farmers to have better access to markets, right? That was the idea behind government's move. You might support it, you might be against it, but that was the main idea behind these farm legislations, right? So government is doing a lot. So whatever the government is doing, you'll write about that in your conclusion. All right? And with that, you will complete this answer. Clear? Make sense? All right. Let's move on to our second question. Discuss the necessity of sustainable agriculture in India to build resilience against threat of climate vagaries. All right, let's discuss this. Now in this question, they are asking you that why is there a requirement of sustainable agriculture in India? Well, to start with, you need to know what sustainable agriculture is. Well, sustainable agriculture is part of sustainable development, which means that you need to develop while also focusing on the longevity of your development. You cannot develop now by sacrificing the development of future generations, right? So develop your agricultural systems now. It's important to have a fast growing agricultural sector, agrarian sector now, but not by sacrificing the growth potential of agriculture in future. Right? So your agriculture should be sustainable. Now, why is there a requirement of sustainable agriculture in India right now? Well, they say that in India, land degradation is a big problem. Right? Land degradation is a big problem, and the land is degrading. Why? Because of overuse of fertilizers. That's not part of sustainable agriculture. Overuse of pesticides. Well, that's not part of sustainable agriculture. Overuse of irrigation facilities. That's not part of sustainable agriculture. Your agriculture won't sustain itself if you're degrading your precious land resources, because after all, the most important resource for agriculture is land only. If you'll degrade your land for short-term growth now, well, you will sacrifice the growth potential for the future. Because if future generation does not have proper land resources, how will they sustain their agriculture? So, land degradation is happening at a very rapid scale because of overuse of chemicals in our farm practices, right? Then, the other problem is burden on water resources. We are overusing water. Third problem is climate change. You know, after industries, the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emission is agriculture. These water-clogged, water-submerged rice fields are actually a source of methane, which is a greenhouse gas, right? It has a huge global warming potential. Clear? So because of climate change, well, your monsoon has become unpredictable, which is impacting the farmers. Unpredictable monsoon. Natural hazards are occurring, like cyclones, right? Natural hazards are occurring. Well, disease-causing bacteria or different disease-causing organisms are actually increasing. Make sense? It is all because of climate change. So climate change is causing a huge problem as far as agriculture is concerned. There are various insects whose populations are increasing, are increasing. Why? For a very simple reason, that now a warm earth is more conducive for their growth. Because of global warming, because of climate change, certain different species of insects which are harmful for your crop yield are growing. To stop them, you are overusing pesticides, which is again causing a problem. By overuse of fertilizers and pesticides, you are also causing water pollution, air pollution, land pollution. And you know what? Because of all these things, agricultural productivity is declining. Agricultural productivity is declining, and it's declining fast. There is a reason why farmers are up in arms against the government, because they are facing this problem. Yes, they are saying that their main problem is these 3 new farm laws. But actually, even before these farm laws were introduced in Lok Sabha, well, farmers were facing these issues and their incomes were declining, their productivity was declining. And all of that was because of climate change. Climate change is a huge problem. So in such a situation, the need of the hour is sustainable agriculture. Now, what is sustainable agriculture? What can you do through sustainable agriculture, and what are the advantages of sustainable agriculture? Well, you know, Food and Agricultural Organization has propounded or has given this idea of climate smart agriculture. You will mention that in your answers. Food and Agricultural Organization and various other organizations have given this idea of climate smart agriculture. Now, what are the basic objectives of climate smart agriculture? They say that agriculture should be changed. The agricultural practices should be changed so that we can call these agricultural practices climate smart. Now, what do we mean by climate smart agriculture? Well, climate smart agriculture means that you increase agricultural productivity without harming the environment. Right? There are 3 basic objectives of climate smart agriculture. 1, increasing agrarian productivity. Increasing agrarian productivity and farm income. Adapting and making farms resilient to climate change. Reduce or remove greenhouse gas emissions, right? So through climate smart agriculture, you are actually trying to achieve these 3 objectives. You are increasing farm productivity without hampering the environment. You are adapting to change in climate. Like, climate is already changing. So our agricultural practices should adapt to these changes, right? So you should do that. And do not follow those agricultural practices that lead to greenhouse gas emissions. So for example, overgrowing of rice, submerging your rice fields with water, well, that contributes towards global warming, right? So you should stop these things. Clear? So reduction or removal of greenhouse gas emissions is another objective of climate smart agriculture. We require this because unless we become sustainable with our agricultural practices, we won't be able to sustain agriculture for long. And sustaining agriculture for long is important because agriculture provides us with food. You see, world's population is rising rapidly, but agricultural productivity is declining. Sooner rather than later, there will come a time when the world won't be able to produce enough food to feed its own population. Countries won't be able to produce enough food to feed its own population because your agriculture is not sustainable. It won't sustain for long. Make sense? So that is why there is a need to shift towards climate smart agriculture. You know, Food and Agriculture Organization also has a strategic roadmap. Strategic roadmap 2022 to 31. This is Food and Agricultural Organization strategic roadmap, and this roadmap actually endorses climate smart agriculture. You know what are the 4 major aims of strategic roadmap? What are they trying to do? They want better productivity. That means more production of food, better nutrition, because overuse of pesticide has actually hampered the nutritional quality of your food. It's akin to food poisoning, overuse of pesticides. Then, better environment, and 4th is better life for all. So they say that strategic roadmap of FAO comes with 4 betters: better productivity, better nutrition, better environment, better life for all. So this is actually a requirement, not just for India, for all countries in the world, right? So that is why sustainable agriculture is important. Now, your sustainable agricultural practices should align themselves with climate smart agriculture. Now, what are the advantages? So discuss the necessity of sustainable agriculture in India to build resilience against the threat of climate vagaries. Now, what should India, the main part of your question is, what should India do to protect itself from climate change, to protect its agricultural sector from climate change? Well, they should follow climate smart agriculture. They should come up with schemes to remove greenhouse gas emissions from the agricultural sector. And in your answer, you will quote different government schemes that are trying to achieve sustainable agriculture. Right? So that this should be the part of your answer. Clear? Make sense? All right, let's move on to the third question. What is peri-urban agriculture? In what way it can aid in addressing the effects of climate change? Discuss. So again, this question is pretty direct, and this question consists of 2 parts. Part number 1 is, what is peri-urban agriculture? First, you'll define peri-urban agriculture, and in the next part, you'll actually discuss the advantages of peri-urban agriculture. How peri-urban agriculture would actually help India combating climate change. All right. So first of all, let's focus on what is peri-urban agriculture. Well, generally they say that agriculture is the domain of rural areas, right? But as you all know, that slowly and gradually India is urbanizing. Now, what do we mean by urbanizing, right? What we're trying to say over here is that urban spaces are increasing and rural spaces are declining. Urban population is increasing, rural population is declining. That is what we mean by urbanization. So if agriculture is completely confined to rural spaces, then we can safely say that land for agriculture is declining. Now the problem is that population in India is fast increasing. It is increasing rapidly. But land available for growing food is declining. So how will you solve this problem? As a matter of fact, you need more food to feed this increasing number of population. But your land availability is declining slowly and gradually. Not slowly and gradually, it's actually declining pretty fast. Now, how can you improve food productivity? How can you improve production of food to feed this fast growing urban population or fast growing Indian population? Well, one way out is, because land is finite, Land availability is declining. So how can you improve food production in India? Well, you can improve farm productivity. Now, what is farm productivity? Well, if you are able to grow more food from very little land by using technology, by using fertilizers, if you are able to grow more food through the same piece of land or a declining piece of land, then your farm productivity is increasing. So by increasing farm productivity, you can feed this increasing number of people with finite land resources. You can do that. But as we all know, that farm productivity is also on the decline. Farm productivity is already on decline. So we are in an emergency-like situation where land available for growing food is declining, farm productivity is declining. So there is a solution that can solve this problem, and that solution is peri-urban agriculture. What peri-urban agriculture is targeting at, it's actually targeting increasing land resources. Peri-urban agriculture says that we shouldn't be completely dependent on rural spaces for growing food. Through peri-urban agriculture, you will also be able to grow food in urban spaces as well. Now, how will you do that? Well, let's suppose this is a city called City A. Now, this circle is the boundary of that city. Along with that boundary, you will create fields. And these fields would grow food. So generally, food was grown on rural land. But now food can also be grown on the outskirts of a city. If you grow food on the outskirts of the city, there are various advantages. Advantage number one, land availability would increase. Right? Land availability will definitely increase. Then advantage number two, more green spaces. Yeah, more green spaces in urban areas. More green spaces, right? More green spaces in urban areas would also solve the problem of climate change, because these green spaces would sequester carbon from the atmosphere, right? So it would absorb carbon dioxide, because after all, green spaces, plants do breathe in carbon dioxide through photosynthesis, right? So it will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. More green spaces in urban areas would improve air quality in those urban areas, right? Then there is this problem of urban heat island. You must have read about it in your environment section, in your environment syllabus. Urban heat island is a problem that urban areas face because of too much concrete in urban areas, right? So if you'll increase green spaces in urban areas, well, this problem would also get solved, right? Then first problem was land availability. Second, more green spaces in urban areas. Third, urban heat island. Then four, food will be grown closer to markets. Because most of the food that is grown in rural areas is consumed in urban areas. Now, a lot of time is wasted, time, money and resources are wasted in transporting that food from rural areas to urban areas. If you're growing food closer to urban areas only, then that time, money, energy and resources are not spent in transporting that food, right? There are certain food items that are called perishables, right? Perishables rot if they are not properly stored in cold storages. Now, most of the perishables are lost in transport, right? That won't happen if transport distance gets shortened, and that distance would get shortened by growing food near urban areas. Make sense, right? So food will be grown closer to markets, closer to urban areas. Urban areas that would reduce transportation cost, storage cost and food wastage as well. All right, makes sense? So these are the major advantages of peri-urban agriculture. You'll expand on those advantages, and there is many other advantages that are small advantages, but there are many other advantages that you'll find in the PDF given with this lecture. All right, makes sense? So yeah, this question was a short question. I guess this question, if this question repeats itself in your UPSC mains, well, UPSC will keep this question in the category of 150-word answers. So it's a short question and consists of 2 parts. You'll be able to answer these 2 parts clearly. It's a very clear question. All right. So we won't waste much time, more time on this. All right. So quickly we'll move on to question number 4. Discuss the role of IT in agriculture and also explain what are the major challenges in the spread of e-technology to the farmers. Again, this question also consists of 2 parts. One, role of information technology in agriculture, part 1, and part 2 would be what are the challenges being faced by agricultural sector in adopting information technology, right? Why IT is not being adopted quickly in agriculture despite so many advantages, right? So first part would be role of IT in agriculture. The second part would be challenges. All right. So let's focus on the first part. How can we use information technology for agriculture? Well, they say that technology has application in each and every aspect of human life, agriculture being one of them. So how can IT help agriculture? Well, there are various ways. So what you'll do in your answer is you'll actually divide agriculture into its various constituents, and then you'll give an application of information technology for each of those constituents. So for example, one of the constituent of agriculture is farm input management. Now in farm input management, farmers need to know what fertilizers they should use, how many fertilizers they should use, how many, what sort of pesticides they should use, what fertilizers are required for their soil type, how much irrigation they should focus on, right? All these things are part of farm inputs. Now, farm input management can get a great help from information technology. Now, how would that happen? Well, one example is, well, there is this thing called soil health card. Right? Now, soil health card is a facility given by government to tell farmers what sort of soil type they have in their farms, right? So through that, farmers have the knowledge on the nutrient profile of their soils, right? Farmers know what sort of nutrients are there in their soil, what sort of nutrients are required in their soil, what sort of fertilizers they should use, what sort of water, how much water they should use, right? So they get the complete knowledge of their soil. Now, if soil health card is there, farmers give samples of their soil to government and government gives them information about their soil. If this entire process is taken online, so for example, there is this app with farmers. Once they have given the sample of their soil, farmers on their app would get that profile, would get the entire knowledge about their soils in that app. So farmers won't have to go to soil health card laboratories every time, right? If this entire process is taken online, well, farmers would be benefited. Then in farm input management, if farmers through their app are aware about the availability of water around their farm, well, that would help them in planning for different crops, right? Then in farm meteorology, the next farm input management, then next application is meteorology. Climate updates. If farmers are getting climate updates, monsoon updates on their mobile app, well, that will help farmers, right? So meteorological services, rainfall forecast, monsoon forecast, climate forecast basically. That's very important for farmers, and IT can really help in spreading that information. Then market linkages. Have you ever heard about eNAM? eNAM was a step in the direction of taking markets online. So generally farmers actually face this problem that it's very difficult for them to discover the price of their crop. right? Now through eNAM, farmers would be able to discover the price of their crop on their mobile phone, right? So price discovery, then online auction of their crops, all of these facilities would be available. So market linkages would get a boost, right? Makes sense? Clear? So farm input management, meteorological services, market linkages, and many more. And you'll get information about many other applications of IT in agriculture in the model answers. But my point was that you should structure your answer in such a way. All right? So farm input management, meteorology, market linkages, and many more. Farmers will get information at the comfort of their own homes through IT. Clear? Now, what are the major challenges? Well, major challenges. Number one, digital divide. Many farmers do not have access to smartphones. Number two is internet connectivity issues. Then digital literacy is a problem. Right? So one more application, Kisan credit card or online processing of loans is also one way to help farmers. I just remember this. Clear? Yeah, we were talking about challenges. Digital divide, internet connectivity, digital literacy, then poor policy implementation by the government. Government has come up with various schemes to introduce IT in farm practices, but those schemes are not being properly implemented, and many more and many more. So there are various challenges. Some of these challenges I have discussed on the board. Many other challenges you'll find in the model answers with this PDF. All right. So it was a fairly simple question. What they did was they asked you about the role of IT in agriculture. Well, this was the role of IT in agriculture. And what are the challenges? Most of the challenges are related to digital divide, digital literacy, digital connectivity, and all that stuff. All right. Make sense? So now we are done with the fourth question. Now let's move on to the last question, which is, what is zero budget natural farming? Discuss its benefits and explain how it is better than organic farming. So zero budget natural farming is a chemical free farming technique. It's a group of agricultural practices that actually borrow from our traditional ancient agricultural practices, and it actually goes against use of chemical fertilizers, chemical pesticides in agriculture. You know who developed zero budget natural farming? Well, zero budget natural farming was developed by Subhash Palekar in 1990s, and he developed this practice in response to Green Revolution. According to Subhash Palekar, well, Green Revolution has actually destroyed the lives of many farmers because Green Revolution farm practices are very expensive. So to solve that problem, Subhash Palekar actually developed zero budget natural farming. Well, zero budget natural farming doesn't use any chemicals whatsoever. It actually uses all natural methods, all natural practices to support agriculture. Now, you know, zero budget natural farming consists of 4 pillars. ZBNF is very popular in southern India, Maharashtra, Karnataka. All right. So what are the 4 pillars of zero budget natural farming? Pillar number 1, Jeevamruta. Well, what do we mean by Jeevamruta? They say that there are certain microbes in our soils which actually help in farm productivity, which actually help in crop growth. There are various such microbes like earthworms, various types of bacteria, right? So in zero budget natural farming, you are actually supporting the growth of these beneficial microbes, beneficial insects, beneficial organisms, right? That is why Jeevamruta. You use cow dung, cow urine to allow these beneficial microbes to grow, right? The next part is Bijamrita. you actually treat the seeds, beej. You actually treat seeds with neem and various other natural products, right? The reason for treating seeds is, well, that's very simple. Generally, we use pesticides so that harmful insects and microbes do not grow or do not grow near these crops. Well, if you don't want to use chemical pesticides, then you should use natural stuff so as to prevent harmful insects from growing, right? So Bij Mruta is treating of seeds so that harmful insects and harmful pests do not attack the seeds or do not attack these plants. So we are not using chemical pesticides, but we're using natural, those pesticides that occur in nature. Neem and various other, cow urine, various other things. So Bij Mruta, then Achhadan, or we also call it mulching. You know, the biggest problem in dry lands is that the soil is unable to retain moisture because of the heat, right? Therefore, you require proper irrigation facilities. But what about those areas that do not have proper irrigation facilities? These areas also need to preserve moisture. Now, one way of preserving moisture is covering your soil with straw. That is called mulching. When you cover your soil with straw, it's very difficult for water to escape your soil through evaporation, right? So you're preserving soil moisture through this natural traditional technique called mulching. And last is Vafasa. Well, Vafasa is actually, you are trying to make your soil breathe. So through various microbes like earthworm and all that, they actually create spaces in your soil so that in your soil there are water molecules, air molecules, which are important for growth of your crops. Right? So through these four pillars, zero budget natural farming is there. Now, what are the advantages of zero budget natural farming? Well, there are various advantages. Well, it lowers the cost of farmers. Various farmers are undergoing the problem of debt because they have to borrow a lot for buying fertilizers, for farm inputs and all that stuff. This would reduce their cost dramatically. Then this is environmentally sustainable. It will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and many more advantages like that. It is a part of climate smart agriculture, as a matter of fact. All right. So those advantages are pretty simple. I'm guessing that you already know about that. All right. So I won't discuss about the advantages of zero budget natural farming. All right. If you are unaware of the advantages of zero budget natural farming, well, you can take a look at the PDF that we are going to provide with this lecture. All right. Make sense? All right, then. That was the last question. And with that, we are done for today. We have completed 5 questions from the topic of agriculture. All right. So I hope you like this lecture. If you have any doubts, then you are free to contact us for those doubts. And if you want, then we can also come up with a special lecture for clearing your doubts if you want that. Anyways, that's it from my side, guys. I'll see you next time with more stuff. Thank you.